All right,
All
welcome
right.
everybody to Managing Professional Conflict. I'm Patricia Cardozo, the Associate Director for the Center for Student Engagement and Activities. And I want to introduce Julia McMillan, the coordinator and co-host this evening. And we're just really delighted to have Cris Gilbert give a talk tonight on managing professional conflict. She's the National University Ombudsman here, and she has a great history of teaching mediation and other conflict resolution courses with El Centro College, the University of North Texas, Dallas. She was also appointed with Pepperdine University as an adjunct faculty member to teach there. She had her own office, the mediation office of Cris Gilbert, skilled at generating ideas and helping overcome impasses. And she also has served on the boards of Texas Mediation Credentialing Association and as president of the Texas Association of Mediators and co-chair of the organizations. She holds memberships with the American Bar Association, ADR section, Texas Bar Association, ADR section, and Texas Mediation Trainers Roundtable. So it's a big deal to have Cris here tonight. And we're fortunate to have her at National University as our ombudsperson. And Cris, before we begin with your presentation, can you give us a little bit of background about what is the function of the Ombuds office?
And, absolutely.
Oh, look at that. It's a perfect segue.
I'm glad you asked. All right. Hi, guys. Thank you so much for coming. I know we've got a really small group, which is fine because that just makes it a more intimate and more opportunity for everybody to get a chance to speak and to engage and just have a great time, especially since now it's the evening. We've probably all had a long day, so I'm hoping you guys have a little bit of energy left to get started. Well, I'm the organizational ombudsman for National University. Basically, they call me the inaugural ombudsman, which just means I'm the first and only one they've ever had. And so I've been there almost 3 years now, to be 3 years in February. And so I completely set the office up, wrote my own charter, my own policies and procedures. And upon arriving at National University, I joined the International Ombudsman Association. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. And if you notice on the screen, there are 3 types of ombudsman. There's an advocate ombudsman, a classical ombudsman, and an organizational ombudsman. So for me, I have been 2 of them. The advocate ombudsman is basically in most of your health care fields. I was an advocate ombudsman for the state of Texas. And so I advocated for residents in long-term care and assisted living facilities. So I went in just to talk with, meet with, and sometimes mediate with families and residents, and also to make sure that the facilities themselves were following all of the state guidelines. So that's your advocate ombudsman. The classical type of ombudsman you'll see mostly in government agencies like the military, and all of the governmental departments have ombudsman. And so the difference between them all, the advocate ombudsman really advocates for the residents, advocates for safety, fairness, everything. The classical ombudsman, however, does do some investigation. They do some reporting on their findings and so forth. So they're a little bit cross between your advocate and your organizational ombudsman. So the organizational ombudsman, according to the International Ombudsman Association, we follow these 4 principles. The first one is independent. So that just means that although I work for National University, my office is independent from all of the other offices, the colleges, and so forth at National University. I report to Dr. Andrews for budgetary reasons, Dr. Andrews and Dr. Singh for my budget. The other thing is I'm impartial and neutral. That just means I don't take the side of the university, nor do I take the side of the visitors that come to see me, anybody that calls or comes by and talks to me. The third and most important is, you see I have in all caps, that is, everything is confidential. Although we're recording tonight, I'm hoping that you guys will kind of keep everybody's information to yourself and not share it. So confidentiality is probably the cornerstone of what I do. And actually, since the COVID season has started, this has really boomed my business, because a lot of people feel safe. They feel comfortable in their own homes or wherever they are working from. And they have just started calling me and emailing me and phoning me to talk. And right now, since we're not in an office, I use my private cell phone, so they have access to that. So that is a definitely private and confidential number that you can call. And all of that information will be at the end of the presentation. The last thing is, it's informal, just like we are tonight. Just relax and enjoy the conversation. I don't do any investigations. I don't make any claims or reports. The only thing I report are systemic issues. So say, for instance, if I get several visitors coming in and talking about the same issue, then it's systemic. I have to let Dr. Andrews and Dr. Singh know, look, you got a problem, almost like that little cliche, Houston, we got a problem. So I make sure that they know what's going on. It's not who told me what was going on, but that there is a systemic issue. And I also work with them on what are some ways that you can resolve this. The other thing I do for National is I work real close with Title IX because a part of their process, they do formal investigations, but as a part of their process, they have informal resolution. So when people decide that they really aren't ready to just go into a full-blown investigation, they'll ask Heather Tyrell to maybe get with me so that they can have an opportunity to just kind of say what was on their heart and their mind prior to starting an investigation. If it's resolved, they don't have to go through that investigative process. So that's part of what I do. I do trainings. And so this is one of the, I think maybe third or fourth training that I've been doing for National. The first one was I did a full-blown mediation training for the Title IX group, all of the investigators. And so I really appreciate Patricia inviting me to do this. And what qualifies me to do all of this is that I have been in the dispute resolution, conflict resolution field for quite some time, for a little bit over 30-something years. So I've taught mediation, conflict resolution, negotiation, arbitration, all of those dispute resolution processes, even an ombudsman course. That's what I taught for Pepperdine. And so that's what I've been doing. I hail from Texas, so I'm still a Dallas Cowboy fan, even though they're doing very poorly this year, but still a Cowboy fan. Anyway, I'm enjoying being here in California, and I tonight am going to just give you a quick overview of conflict. And I really think in order to manage professional conflict in the workplace, at home, anywhere, you first need to start with, what is conflict? How do we identify what conflict is? Because so many people perceive something to be a conflict that really may not be a conflict. And so I'm going to try to help you guys with that tonight. So if you have any questions about the Ombudsman Office, please feel free to put it in the chat. Hold on to your question, and then you can maybe ask me at the end. All right, so here's our agenda for tonight. And from what I understand, Patricia's told me that you're going to get a certificate in conflict resolution through the LinkedIn learning process. Is that correct, Patricia?
Yes, there is a module that we have access to that will give everybody at the end of the presentation for sure.
Okay. Okay, very good. I kind of skimmed through it a little bit and it seems like really good training. So you guys will enjoy that. At least you'll have some concepts in mind once you take the course. So what we're going to talk about tonight is what is conflict? And I'll get your participation in that. And then we'll talk about responses. How do we respond to conflict? And I'm going to use some things from a book called Mindset Your Manners, and you'll get to hear a little bit more about that later. And then at the end, we'll talk about communication and conflict just a little bit and how we communicate. And we'll take a quick little test. And not about the training tonight, but this is just a fun test, just to kind of show you how conflict impacts us. And we'll go from there. So welcome. We have a little less than an hour to spend this evening, and I'd like to get as much information to you prior to that LinkedIn certificate course as we can. So this is our agenda for tonight. All right. So what is conflict? So let's see if we can define conflict. I think I might be able to, let's see. You guys, I don't see where we can, the annotated. Do y'all see? I don't see that we have it on here.
I see conflict defined, that
Okay.
particular screen.
Let me go back.
Okay.
Well, what I was trying to do was find the little thing for annotated so that people could write in what conflict is. So don't look like none of us have it.
I believe that you would need to share a whiteboard if you wanted to have us annotate, Chris.
Yeah, do you know how to do that?
I believe that if you hover over the share screen button at the bottom, you should see an option to share a whiteboard.
Let's see. Okay, I'm sharing my screen. Share your screen. Pause. Don't see where it says share a whiteboard.
It's not an option.
That's okay.
I think this might have to do with this particular account, so apologize about that.
Okay,
yeah.
Not a problem, not a problem. So what you guys can do, as I said here, you can use the unannotated button, but if you don't have it in the chat, just go ahead and type in the chat what you think conflict is. When you hear the word conflict, what resonates with you? What comes up when you hear conflict? Let me see if I can get my chat up so I can see. Friction, okay, all right. Clash of interests, not seeing a situation the same way. Okay, any others? What do you feel? What comes up? Disagreement, argument, frustration. Absolutely, absolutely. Anything else? Just keep them coming. And it doesn't have to be private. You can do it to the whole group if you'd like. We
can't send it to the whole group. I think at least for me, I only have option to do it directly to you.
Oh, really? That's interesting. Oh, wow. We're learning so much about this Zoom thing. All right. Well, okay. You guys got frustration.
I just changed the permission, so everybody should be able to now do it to everyone.
Okay.
So that we can all see it. Okay.
That work? Let me see. Yeah, there's a everyone now.
Okay.
That way we could all see what we've listed. All right. All right. Tension. Okay. Very good. Very good. All right. So if you look at these statements and these words that you guys have come up with, what do they all have in common? What kinds of statements and words are these? I mean, what do they have in common? They're unpleasant, absolutely. What else? Uncomfortable, negative, exactly. They have negative connotation. So why is that? Why do you guys, you can unmute yourselves if you want to. We don't have to do it all through chat, but why do you think it is that when you hear conflict or when you see conflict, you begin to feel and resonate with these types of words, these types of negative words? Why do you guys think that is?
Well,
I feel like, oh, sorry, Julia.
no, go ahead.
I feel like conflict resolution isn't really something that's taught to us. So when we think of conflict, a lot of us don't have that skill to, because conflict can be good, right? That's how we learn. But a lot of us don't have that skill to be able to work through it. So we see this negative and uncomfortable and unpleasant because we don't really know how to work through it.
Okay, very good, Melissa. That's excellent. Emily or Jacqueline?
Yeah, what I would say is that at least in my culture or in my home, I've been taught to agree, to what people are saying, like try not to start a conflict, but just agree with what people are saying.
Okay, all right.
Something I was really struggling to articulate in the chat. I appreciate being able to talk. You know, when I was asked to define conflict, all the words were negative, but I was like, oh, you know what? I kind of like a bit of conflict. Like I kind of can find it a bit enlivening, or I enjoy like a very spirited debate. So I'm trying to find a way to define it that captures the fact that for me, it's not always 100% negative.
Okay, okay. Anybody else?
I've seen conflict being taken like very personally, even though they're just ideas. You like take it to heart, and then
Okay.
it just snowballs.
Okay. Well, I will tell you guys, and for you, Julia, when you had an opportunity to reprocess and think more about it, what really comes to us first when we hear the word conflict, or if I say what resonates with you when you hear the word conflict, what normally comes up is our responses to conflict. All of these things is how we respond. We respond in an unpleasant way, in an uncomfortable way. Sometimes we have tension when we feel conflict. Sometimes we're just totally frustrated when we are in conflict or when we feel like we're in conflict. Conflict is usually associated with an emotion, with a feeling, a negative feeling in most cases. And so if you really stop and think about it, when you are in conflict or when you feel conflict, it's usually all in your senses. You either get butterflies in your stomach, sweaty palms, you know, all kinds of things start to happen to you physiologically when you hear the word conflict. And so those are our responses to conflict. And what that does is it triggers us. It triggers us back to all what I say is gifts, all those wonderful gifts that we've been given over our lifetime. And those are gifts that have come from our family, our friends, our preachers, our teachers. All of these people have given us these wonderful gifts, which are basically what you guys have explained here, that frustration, that tension, a little bit of shyness, a little bit of selfishness. All of those things start to come up when we're in conflict. That's the physiological part of conflict. But change isn't hard. We can always make changes. Once we have identified and recognized what happens to us physically when we're in conflict, then we can start to have a mind change. So what I have used and what I've learned over the years, I've been practicing conflict resolution, is I have to ask questions to get people into cognition, into thinking about what this conflict is all about. What is going on here? What role am I playing? And why? Even the simple question of, why do I feel this way? Once you ask yourself why I feel this way, your brain is going to go back to thinking about, oh, that happened to me in grade school. Oh, that happened to me in kindergarten. So one of the things that my mediation teacher would ask us when they talked about try not to mediate with people you know or people that are close to you, because you really can't separate yourself. And so one of the analogies the teacher gave was, if you were in kindergarten and Billy was in your class and every day you came to class, he hit you upside the head with a block. Okay, so you grow up, you're in college, or you're an adult now, and you are in a mediation, you the mediator, and then all of a sudden Billy walks in the door. What are you going to think about? You're going to think about all those times he hit you upside your head with that block. So that's what we have here when we talk about what is conflict. We start to think about all of those experiences, all of those emotions that we felt over time. But like I said, change isn't hard. Uncertainty, shifting identity, modifying beliefs, stress, and emotional pain, these things are what's hard because when we encounter them, they're the cards that we are forced to play whether we want to or not. Ready or not, you have to make a decision. You have to make a decision to think about what is next. What am I going to do next while I'm in this conflict? The thing that forces your hand is the conflict, is conflict. So the human brain is wired to pay attention to conflict, even when we don't consciously know we're experiencing a problem. Conflict just basically hijacks us, hijacks our brain and triggers that mental rumination, which is the annoying experiences of thinking about the same thing over and over again without wanting to do so. So when we're lying in bed, awake, stressed out, and unable to get these things out of our minds, or we basically can't go back to sleep, that's conflict. That's part of conflict. There's nothing inherently wrong with conflict. Conflict is not bad or good, positive or negative. It just is. It's how we respond to conflict that puts it in either one of those categories, bad or good, negative or positive. There's nothing inherently wrong with a little bit of conflict, but the problem lies basically in our biology, because all of those feelings that you guys have just represented here in your responses to conflict are innately there. They're there. They're part of our being, who we are. They're all the makeup of who we are. And our cells have memories. So whenever you start to feel conflict, that's what you're feeling. All right, so let's see if we can get to the next step. All right, so I'm going to tell you a couple of little scenarios that I came across in the book that my friend here, Daniel Dana, wrote about what he perceives conflict to be. First story is, a young man named Seamus was graduating from school, and he's looking for a job, and he wanted to go to work for a big Fortune 500 company. He couldn't decide whether to take a position there or with a smaller company. He felt like, he wanted to work somewhere big, make a lot of money early on in life, and that way he could retire early and so forth. And so he was struggling with the decision as to which job to take, where to go, what to do. So do you guys think that was a conflict? Did Seamus have a conflict? Melissa, you said yes? Okay. What makes you think that was a conflict?
I think it could be an inner conflict. So you're I feel like a lot of times when you think of conflict and conflict resolution, it has to do with someone else. But I feel like a lot of times we have inner conflicts. So that's kind of what I was thinking. Like it is like decision making, I guess. So maybe it's decision making and not conflict resolution. But
Okay.
yeah, I don't know.
All right. Well, no, this one is not. Seamus was just confused about what he wanted to do, indecisive, couldn't decide. Now, if Seamus had taken the wrong position and he became frustrated and all of these things you guys have mentioned here, the tension was high at work and he, started to run into problems at work, then yeah, that would have been a conflict. All right. So the next story is a couple. They were working together at a company, and so they had a problem with one of their projects, and so they were just kind of going back and forth about what should we do here and what should we do there, and good information was coming up, but they didn't quite have all the information that they really needed. And so they were just kind of going back and forth about the situation. So do you guys think that was a conflict between these two people? No, they just needed to use better problem solving skills, finding out, doing more research, doing more brainstorming, coming up with better ideas. But if they had decided to start making personal attacks on each other, then they probably would have been crossing over into the land of conflict. But right then they were just basically trying to solve a problem. So don't let problem solving catch you off guard. All right, another young lady, actually I got another one here, but another young lady was working and she was having a problem concentrating at work. There was some construction going on outside the office. She was really frustrated with not being able to get her work done. So when she got home, her husband asked her what was wrong, and she was like, I can't take it anymore. That construction is driving me crazy. I can't get this project I need to have done on time. It's just stressing me out. It's crazy. And so was that a conflict? Okay. Here again, Melissa, you might see it as an intrapersonal conflict. Yes, indeed, it could be an intrapersonal conflict before it to be an interpersonal conflict. Basically, all she needed was a little stress management, maybe go to the spa, get a massage or something to kind of calm her nerves, or maybe find a better place to work to get that project done away from the construction. However, if that stressful situation had caused her to start to being not a good co-worker at work and having issues with her co-workers, then you would see that stress management could turn into a conflict. Okay, so those are really not conflicts. All right, so when we look at conflict, the story that he uses in the book is John and Donna were in a situation where they worked close proximity together, and John liked to pace. He liked to get up and walk around and pace around, and it annoyed Donna considerably. So Donna was like, can you just sit down? Is there something wrong with you? Did you have a medical problem, a mental problem that you have to walk up and down the aisle all day? It drives me crazy. And so John turns around and says to Donna, hey, I have to pace so I can concentrate on what I need to do. Who are you to tell me to sit down and not be able to walk around? But when you wear that horrendous perfume that smells up the whole office. So was that a conflict between John and Donna? Absolutely, absolutely. They just took it to a whole new level, didn't they? All right. So what you find to really understand what conflict is, according to Daniel Dana, is that conflict is interdependent. With John and Donna and with the other couple that were problem solving, it's interdependent. We need something from each other. Okay, they both needed something from each other. So that made it interdependent. The other thing was they blamed each other. Donna blamed John for not being able to get her work done because he was pacing around, and opposite, John decided to, flash back at Donna with insults. So the next thing comes in, they're angry, okay? The last thing is, because they were arguing back and forth and not really doing the work, their behavior was causing a problem. So when you have all four of those things in place, yes, you have a bona fide conflict going on. And this, I chose to use Daniel Dana's book and his definitions of conflict resolution, because we're talking about professional conflict resolution. So these are the things that you will encounter in your classes, in the workplace, even in social life, some of these things will come up. Sometimes you just might be stressed out. Sometimes you just can't make a concerted decision on your own. So keep in mind that once you get into the point where you need somebody else for something, and blame and anger and your behavior is causing a problem comes into play, then that you're in conflict. And so you really have to shift your mindset and start thinking about, how can we resolve this? How can we make a change? Any questions so far? Okay, none? All right. All right, so getting away from conflict basically frees your mind to think about whatever you want. So once you start thinking about the things that you actually really need to move forward or to resolve an issue, it's going to be for the better. Without conflict, you are more attentive, you're more aware, and capable of meeting your goals. You can be compassionate towards others without having to vie for self-preservation, when you're not so caught up in the negative connotation of conflict. You can look at the world with wonderment and an appetite for learning new things. Those gems of charisma, warmth, power, and presence are traits that naturally exist within you. So without conflict, your thoughts and your feelings are perfectly acceptable to share publicly without censorship. But to escape conflict, you must go through a hero's journey on your own. This is your call. Deny, you can reject it, you can turn back, and you can get it out of your system. It's time for you to see what the world looks like when you aren't consumed with conflict, okay? And knowing that whether it is a conflict or whether it's not a conflict. All right, so any questions before we move on?
I just love your reference to the hero's journey. That's such a wonderful way to think about approaching conflict.
Yes, yes, yes. All right, so I am going to introduce you guys to another friend of mine who also is an author. I need to write a book because it seems like all my friends are writing books. All right, so Nicole Gravadga wrote a book called Mindset Your Emotions. And the set stands for, let me just make sure I get it right. In her book, one of her students took the SET, and that stands for sensation, for emotion, and thought. So that's where she got the idea to call her book Mindset Your Manners. And so what she says, she's a neuroscientist and an entrepreneur, and she uncovers the secrets to living an exceptional life through managing your conflict. And also making sure you understand it from a brain perception. And so she says, learn to work with your brain instead of against it. Fear of the unknown is a thing of the past. Getting stuck is all a part of the journey that you'll take. And I know we all have probably been on a lot of different journeys, and we'll probably have a lot more ahead of us to go. But really understanding and knowing how to look at and manage conflict is going to help us in the future. So in her book, Mindset Your Manners, she helps you discover what she calls cheat codes to your brain. And remember, she's a neuroscientist, and so she kind of took it to the next level. What she found was as she was doing her research and studying and so forth, and in the area of neuroscience, that how the brain works and how conflict plays a really, really big part in it. So she takes a look at managing your emotions and getting past your foibles, embracing your life. And a lot of what I'm going to share with you comes from her book. And also the last activity that we're going to do comes from her book. So I'm going to share with you this story. It's not too long. I'm gonna kind of paraphrase a little bit as I go along, but this is about Michael, he and a storekeeper. What happened was Michael found himself in a conflict with a shopkeeper. Michael didn't need to be fluent in Russian to understand her message. She was angry. Remember what conflict is, right? Those are the definitions I gave you for conflict. She seemed to be angry at him, which he thought. So what had transpired moments before was an attempted transaction. Michael wanted to buy some everyday things at the corner store. He gathered his items, put them on the counter, and the next thing he knew, the shopkeeper was raging angry. She refused to take his money, glared at him, slammed the cash register door, crossed her arms, and looked away. He was befuddled. He was like, what is going on here? What just happened? And so Michael was an American living in Russia. He had been there for a few years, but was still struggling to fully understand the language, although he was making progress. The culture remained even bigger question, a bigger question mark for Michael. Winston Churchill called Russia a riddle wrapped in an enigma inside a mystery. So Michael's reasons for being in Russia were personal. Michael had followed his love interest. And she says, spoiler alert, he did get the girl. Michael and Susan met when they were 26 years old in Atlanta, Georgia. He fell in love immediately, but she did not. Susan moved to Ukraine to work with a faith-based organization invited by the Russian Ministry of Education to reestablish a foundation of ethics and morals. Initially, her mission was to teach at a business school in a catastrophically messy post-Soviet Ukraine. Susan didn't stay in Ukraine. She was frustrated that her dependence on translators prevented deep conversation. So a year later, she moved to St. Petersburg, Russia, to study Russian and continue her work. Susan was professionally connected to the business of understanding the enigma of the Russian people. So Susan knew a lot about the Russian people. 8 years after Susan moved to Eastern Europe, Michael moved to Russia to join her. For much of the time, time in Russia, Michael wasn't formally working in Susan's organization, but he was familiar with their business formality. And so it was about 6 years, the two of them worked and lived in Russia together. So I'm going to just kind of fast forward. Fortunately for Michael, they had since returned to the United States, and they're here now. They're here in the United States now. So fortunately for Michael, Susan was with him in the store when the shopkeeper lost her cool. Susan was able to talk the woman down after her emotional response to a simple everyday situation. After some discussion, they learned that it was Michael's choice of payment, that threw her into a tizzy. He was paying more than he owed, which meant the shopkeeper had to give him change. not a lot of change, mind you. He had 500 rubles on the counter, which is about $20 at the time, and he was expecting 350 rubles in return. It was this fact that ruined the shopkeeper's mood. Ideally, Michael would have understood the problem. He would have been able to show compassion to the shopkeeper in spite of her behavior. There's that word again, behavior. Maybe he would have been able to alter his behavior so there wasn't a problem. He could have bought more items. He could have searched his pockets for smaller coins. Michael, however, was stunned and didn't do any of these things. The shopkeeper wasn't used to people being cooperative. She was used to fighting. The culture of Russia at the time, which was in the 1990s, was full of fights. Michael saw signs of abuse regularly, and not just in the bad part of town. He said violence and aggression seemed to be normal. Underhandedness was normal. Lying, stealing, and cheating all were expected behaviors. Life had gotten difficult in Russia leading up to and after the fall of the Soviet Union, and most of the people living there had gotten used to doing what they had to do to live. At the peak of violence, right around the time Michael was in Russia, the homicide rate was 3 times higher than it was by the time he settled down around 2011. Alcoholism, embezzlement, drug use, drug trafficking, all those things ran rapid. So business practices and government policies were corrupt and full of clashing. So you guys kind of get the picture that this woman was full of rage. She was full of this was a part of her DNA. It was a part of who she was, and that was to be so angry. So why did the shopkeeper get so upset about having to give Michael 350 rubles? She didn't have the change that she didn't have the change, and that wasn't her fault. The shop owner, her boss, made a habit of coming every hour or so to remove cash from the cash register. So it wasn't that she couldn't just take his money and give him change. It was that she didn't have it. So that frustrated her to the utmost. So anyway, anyone who runs a brick and mortar business in the United States knows that in the morning you always have enough cash to make change, right? But not in this situation. The distribution of that money is such that any transaction will allow the shopkeeper to make change, right? At the end of the day, you balance your register back to the starting amount. That's how we do it here. Keeping enough change in the register was not a practice. Not the practice there. Shopkeepers would start their day with 500 rubles, and as the money built in the register, they would ease into the freedom to make change when necessary. So after a few transactions, she didn't have any change. So the shopkeeper's anger was well beyond what you might expect a person enduring even the most annoying business practice. She was livid, and it was personal. So remember back when you look at those 4 definitions for conflict, personal or a personal behavior plays a big part in it. The shopkeeper was in reaction, not being proactive, but reactive. And her emotional state had little to do with Michael. It didn't have anything to do with Michael. Michael just happened to walk into the hornet's nest of conflict. The shopkeeper likely had conflicts associated with her job, her family, and her neighbors. There was a lot going on with her, and most of the people in Russia at that time, Michael and Susan had a saying they heard to explain what they saw in Russia. They said, hurt people hurt people. And that's basically what happens when you get into a heated conflict. If you're not asking yourself, what's actually going on here? What role am I playing in this conflict? What did I do to make this woman angry? What did I do to make this all happen? If the answer to you is nothing, or I don't, you don't know what it is, you have to start generating options to figure out what's really going on here and how can we fix this. So basically that's that story. So what is conflict? All over again, what is conflict? For Michael and the shopkeeper, conflict looked like displeasure and confusion, some of the same words you guys used earlier, and confusion. Sometimes conflict is less dramatic. Conflict can be subtle. You have some people that live in conflict and they keep a lot of stuff bottled up inside. And at some point it will just explode. Okay, so be mindful of that as well when you see conflict. Conflict occurs when you have a belief that doesn't match your experience. When you have a belief that doesn't match your experience. So when you encounter someone that maybe doesn't look like you, doesn't act like you, or speak like you, that may not be a part of your experience, and it doesn't match your experience. So it may cause some internal conflict with you. And then at some point, it may even spill over into anger and blame and shame and so forth. And then you have a full-blown conflict. All right. So what we call that is cognitive dissonance. And you may hear about this a little bit more when you do your LinkedIn training. So if you look at 1 + 1 = 2, what do you think? Yeah, that's right. That's the right answer. But if I said 1 + 1 is 3, what would you do? What would you think? Well, your belief is 1 + 1 is 2. So it doesn't match.
Yeah, I would say you're wrong.
Your experience. Right. Exactly, Melissa. Exactly. Yes. All right. So yes, when conflict occurs, when that happens, when your belief that doesn't match your experience, you anticipate one thing and another thing happens, just like in the 1 + 1 = 3. The natural brain, human brain naturally registers when two thoughts don't agree. It naturally registers when two thoughts don't agree. And this is a biological response, is the foundation of conflict. The biological term, as I mentioned, is biological is called of conflict is called cognitive dissonance. The brain has a dissonance detector, and it is a very sensitive detector. When something doesn't make sense in light of what we know to be true, we stop and we give it our full attention. We will inspect the conflicting thoughts until we can reconcile the discrepancy. And it can be as simple as those equations. Conflict dissonance is highly motivating. It's uncomfortable it's uncomfortable to have something on your mind that doesn't add up. When you experience conflict, you spend time and effort trying to reconcile it. So that's how these responses come up. The responses, the negative responses, the negative connotations come up, is because we're trying to reconcile it. We're trying to figure out, why are they saying 1 + 1 is 3 when we know and we've experienced 1 + 1 is 2? So it could be highly motivating. It can also be very uncomfortable. It can also be very uncomfortable because our brains are wired to be attracted to conflict. I mean, when you think about it, your first conflict was when? Anybody remember their first conflict?
Cris, I just had a conversation with a friend of mine whose daughter is going through the quote unquote terrible twos.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned to her that's actually when children realize that they're not their mothers, and they start to get their own sense of self-identity. And that's kind of why, because before then, with children, if you ask them who they are, they'll point to their mothers.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you ask it, you know, and it's usually before they're two, who their mommy is, they'll still point to their mothers because they have that identity is conflated. And when they start to pull and have their own identity, that's when you really have that quote unquote terrible twos, but it's really just them becoming them and divorcing themselves from the identity of the parent, which is why I really appreciated the quote on the previous slide because it was so fitting.
Yes, yes, yes. All right, so we're quickly running out of time, so I want to kind of get to the rest of this. Gosh, I didn't think that we needed more than an hour, but just to get the concepts out has taken us quite a while. All right, so quickly, conflict creates delays in our mental processing. So basically what that does is it requires mental processing that creates measurable delays in our cognition and action. These delays mean that we're not mentally quick enough to resolve these things quickly. So the other thing, conflict can be a time waster. When you spend too much time trying to figure out why this person doesn't like me, why am I in these conflicts all the time? Why are we always arguing with each other? It kind of takes a lot of time to do that. It activates the part of our brain that also deals with pain. So that's why you guys came up with a lot of these negative responses to conflict, of frustration and unpleasantness and uncomfortableness. It also takes prudent action to fight back. I usually do a little exercise. If I push my hand against someone else's hand, if I take my hand away, where's their hand gonna go? Nowhere. You have nowhere. So if you don't have anybody to engage in that conflict with, or you're not engaging in conflict, it's not so bad. All right. And again, we mentioned uncomfortable and uncontrollable. All right. So if I am going to, I don't know if we can get to this. I'm going to try to, gosh, I don't know how I can get that to you guys so you can put it in your web browser. Is everybody on a computer where you can use a web browser?
Sure, I can put that link into the chat, Chris.
Okay, and if they can do it, it's really a quick exercise. If you guys can click on that and do the exercise is basically showing you how conflict really gets under our skin. It's called the Stroop test, and you can Google it or whatever and go back and take a look at it, but it shows how our brain works when it comes to conflict, how reading different colors happen. So there's two tests. The first one is you quickly read the colors as fast as you can. It'll give you your score. Then you want to click on next test and then do that test, and it'll tell you how long it took you to do both tests. You guys get to it?
Sorry, I'm having a little issue with the link. Let me just make sure I copied that correctly.
Okay.
Here we go. That should work. Okay. One moment. I'm going to put that in the chat. Oh,
I
you've
think
got
I got
it.
it.
Patricia's got it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
I think
there.
I got it.
All right. If you guys have it, just quickly go there and take that. Yes. You get it? Did it come up? Did everybody get it? Everybody get their final score? This is great. This is great because I can see this, see it on your faces. You guys don't even have to tell me. Ah. You get it, Jacqueline? But anyway, you have the link so you can always go back and retest yourself. But the difference between the two times is the measure of time that you process the conflict of the written word and the ink color. A short time delay means that you were able to get through conflict quickly. A long time delay means that you took a long time to process the conflict.
I felt like it got easier. Like once you started getting into it, it got easier. And then towards the end, I think my brain got tired and it started getting difficult again.
I know you get frustrated, didn't you? It's like blue, but no, the color's blue, but it's white. No, it's red, it's yellow. Right, yeah. If a simple conflict of text meaning and ink color can create measurable delay in your ability to act, imagine what a true life, high stakes conflict might do to your ability to concentrate. Your brain gets bogged down processing conflict. Since we encounter simple and complicated conflicts multiple times a day, every day, you can see that conflict is significant use of human brain power and processing time. Right? All right, well, that's my segment for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. You can give me any feedback that you'd like to give. And here is my contact information. If you want to jot that down, or I can send the PowerPoints to Patricia and she can share those with you as well. Any questions, comments, or concerns about the segment tonight? I appreciate feedback because I'd love training, and I'd love, you know, being able to make it better.
I loved the talk, Cris, and I was really reflecting a great deal on conflict versus our response to conflict. And something I was just very curious about in your professional experience, because I know for me, conflict, when I'm experiencing conflict, it's very, very physical. Like you mentioned, people feel it in their body. And for me, that's 100% true. And I was just curious, kind of in your professional experience, whether you find that's fairly universal or some people are more physical in how they experience conflict. I always felt like a big outlier. So I was very surprised to hear you say that that's very common.
Yes, it is. It's pretty common across any, any culture. It's just the way they respond is what makes the difference. But we all experience and feel conflict in the same way. We all have the same mental capacity to process conflict. I think I mentioned it. I don't even think I covered it with you, but the anterior cingulate cortex, which is part of the brain, actually determines conflict. Your brain determines conflict, that type conflict when it arises. So yeah, I mean, it pretty much has the same response in just about everybody. And it depends on your experience and your background. So some cultures may experience conflict, but they may manage it better. Like if you do that test enough times, you'll be able to get those colors and names really quickly, because you've worked through it and you've managed it. So whatever you learn on the LinkedIn training, start practicing it. The stuff that I've given you tonight, practice it. Go back and do the exercise again. And next time someone asks you what is conflict, your response is going to be a lot different than it was tonight, because you learned a little bit more about what conflict is. So yeah, it goes across all people. Anybody else? All right. Well, you guys let Patricia or Julia know what you'd like to see in the future. I'd be glad to put any other trainings together for you guys and the rest of your group.
Thank you so much, Cris. We're so excited to have you here and to do this with us. And we'll definitely put this on the blog. I'm going to stop the recording actually now, but I want to thank you for your time and thank everybody for coming.